All right, so we're at part 4 of the AWS Security Specialty question, answer, and explanation scenarios. Let's get started. All right. A business requires a forensic logging solution for hundreds of Docker-based apps running on Amazon EC2. The solution must analyze logs in real time, provide message replay, and persist logs. Which services should be employed? Amazon Kinesis and Amazon Elasticsearch. Amazon Kinesis provides real-time data streaming and message relaying capabilities, and Amazon Elasticsearch offers real-time log analysis and persistent storage. Together, they meet all requirements for forensic logging. A company must remove PII data older than 30 days from the S3 bucket DynamoDB table. Which solution provides the most operational efficiency? Create an S3 lifecycle policy to expire objects older than 30 days. Update Lambda function to add TTL attributes in DynamoDB table and enable TTL on the table. S3 lifecycle policies automatically manage object expiration, while DynamoDB TTL automatically removes expired items. This combination requires a minimal operational overhead compared to manual deletion processes. How do you prevent direct access to S3 URLs when using CloudFront distribution? Select a restricted bucket access in CloudFront origin settings and create an origin access identity for the S3 origin. OAI creates a special CloudFront user that can access S3 while restricting bucket access, ensures only CloudFront can retrieve objects, preventing direct S3 URL access. A Lambda function cannot rotate a secret in Secret Manager. CloudWatch shows set secret unable to log into database error. What resolves this? Ensure the Lambda function security group allows outbound connections to EC2 instances, and EC2 security group allows inbound connections from Lambda security groups. The rotation function needs network access to the database to update the credentials. Proper security group configuration allows Lambda to communicate with the database instance. Security administrator receives unprotected private key file error when connecting to the EC2 instance. Which command fixes the permissions? Chmod 04000 ssh myprivatekey.pen. Chmod 0400 sets read-only permissions for the owner only, which is the required security standard for SSH private keys to prevent unauthorized access. Which SCP should be attached to prevent disabling of GuardDuty and Security Hub across all accounts? SCP with deny statements for GuardDuty and Security Hub disable action. An SCP with explicit deny statements for disabling these security services prevents any user, including account administrators, from turning off critical security monitoring. What's the most secure way for Lambda functions to communicate with RDS instances and VPCs? Deploy Lambda functions inside the VPC. Attach the security group with outbound access to the VPC CIDR. Update the database security group to allow traffic from the Lambda security group. Deploying a Lambda in the same VPC and using the security group references provides secure, controlled access without exposing the database publicly. How do you encrypt existing unencrypted RDS PostgreSQL instances? Create a snapshot, copy with the encryption enabled, restore from the encrypted snapshot, use KMS to create a new CMK for RDS operations. RDS encryption cannot be enabled on existing instances. The snapshot, copy, restore process with a KMS CMK is the standard method to encrypt existing databases. Which bucket policy ensures uploaded objects are encrypted? Policy with deny effect for put object without server-side encryption. A deny policy that blocks put object requests without encryption headers forces all uploads to be encrypted, ensuring data protection. How do you automatically deploy config rules to all accounts in the organization? Create a conformance pack from Security 01 account. Create CloudFormation templates for the config activation from the Management 1 account using stack sets. Conformance packs from the Delegated Administrator account deploy rules organization-wide, while stack sets from the Management account ensure config is enabled on all accounts. How do you allow service-linked roles in Account 1 to launch instances with KMS encrypted volumes from Account 2? Allow account 1 to access KMS via key policy. Create a KMS grant for service-linked roles with required actions. Across-account KMS access requires both the key policy permissions and KMS grants with specific actions like key grant, describe key, encrypt, generate data key, decrypt, re-encrypt. A valid SSL certificate configuration for CloudFront. What are they? Default ACM certificate, default CloudFront certificate, and custom SSL certificate in ACM. CloudFront supports its default certificate, ACM managed certificates, and custom certificates stored in ACM for SSL TLS termination. CloudWatch shows 0 messages for encrypted SNS SQS setup. What fixes this? Add an SNS service principal to a CMK key policy with required permissions. Encrypted SNS topics require the SNS service principal in the KMS key policy to encrypt, decrypt messages for delivery to subscribers. How do you implement write once, read many models for S3 objects? S3 object lock, worm, write once, read many, compliance mode. Okay, so S3 object lock in compliance mode prevents object deletion or modification by any user, including the root user, ensuring true worm functionality. What KMS-related problems cause parameter store encryption decryption errors? CMK does not exist, and the CMK is not enabled. So parameter store encryption requires an existing enabled CMK. Non-existent or disabled keys will cause encryption-decryption operations to fail. How do you fix error loading log streams when viewing Lambda logs in CloudWatch? Add logs, get log events actions to the second allow statement in your IAM. The Lambda console requires logs, get log events permissions to display the log streams. This action must be included in the execution roles IAM policy. How do you prevent DevOps teams from modifying CloudTrail configuration? Create a service control policy that prohibits CloudTrail changes and apply it to the appropriate organizational unit. A service control policy can prevent specific actions across accounts in an organization, ensuring CloudTrail configurations remain protected from modification. How do you encrypt existing RDS databases and detect future non-compliance? Create a config rule to detect unencrypted RDS databases with event bridge notification. Take a snapshot, copy with encryption, and restore from the encrypted snapshot. AWS config monitors resource compliance and can trigger notifications for violations, while the snapshot copy restore process encrypts existing databases without downtime. A company has Linux and Windows EC2 instances and private subnets and wants all remote administration performed as securely as possible. What solution meets these requirements? Do not use SSH RSA private keys during the launch of a new instance. Implement AWS Systems Manager Session Manager. Session Manager provides a secure shell access without requiring bastion hosts, SSH keys, or inbound security group rules, eliminating key management risks and providing audit trails. What solution provides Lambda functions read-write access to S3 buckets? Create an IAM role for Lambda with S3 access policy. Create an IAM role for Lambda with a bucket policy specifying the role as the principal. Both IAM role-based policies and S3 bucket policies can grant Lambda access. IAM roles are preferred for hard-coded credentials for security and credential rotation. What's the most operationally efficient way to create least privilege policy to replace AWS managed policies for a script? Create a CloudTrail trail for management events, run the script with existing policies, use IAM Access Analyzer to generate policy based on access activity. IAM Access Analyzer can analyze CloudTrail logs to automatically generate least privilege policies based on actual API usage, reducing manual policy crafting effort. How do you see Security Hub findings from accounts outside the organization? Send invitations to external accounts from Security Hub administrator account. Send the administration requests from member accounts. For accounts outside the organization, Security Hub requires manual invitation acceptance processes rather than the automatic enrollment available within organizations. What enables users to assume role in target accounts for identity federation? Update the trust policy on the role in a target account to allow assumptions from identity account role. The target account's role trust policy must explicitly allow the identity account's role to assume it. Trust policies control who can assume a role. How do you analyze the past week of Apache logs in CloudWatch for specific IP addresses with the least effort? Use CloudWatch Logs Insights with custom query syntax to analyze logs for specific IPs and URLs. CloudWatch Logs Insights and provides built-in query capabilities without requiring data export or additional services, making it the most efficient option. How do you verify that automatic KMS key rotation has occurred? Filter the CloudTrail logs for key rotation events. CloudTrail logs all have KMS API calls, including key rotation events, providing audit trail for compliance verification. How do you improve edge security against layer 7 DDoS attacks for CloudFront with WAF? Configure WAF with rate-based rules that impose rate limit and automatically blocks requests when exceeded. WAF rate-based rules automatically detect and block excessive requests from individual sources, providing effective layer 7 DDoS protection at the edge. What's the most secure way to provide developer account users access to the production account resources? Create cross-account access with IAM roles in the production account. Allow the developer accounts to users to assume the role. Cross-account roles provide temporary credentials and can be configured with precise permissions, avoiding shared credentials or permanent access. What prevents system administrators from launching EC2s in EU West 1 but allows other regions? A permission boundary policy attached to the system admin role, denying EC2 actions in EU West 1. Permission boundaries set maximum permissions for IAM entities. A boundary denying EU West 1 access would prevent EC2 launches in that region, regardless of attached policies. How do you quickly identify compute resources with specific vulnerable web framework versions? Scan all EC2 instances with AWS Systems Manager to identify vulnerable versions of a web framework. Systems Manager inventory can collect software information across EC2 instances, enabling rapid identification of specific application versions for security responses. How do you grant appropriate database access for serverless application modules? Configure IAM policies for each module with Get Cluster Credentials API. Create a local database user for each module. Get Cluster Credentials API allows IAM-based temporary database authentication, while separate database users ensure proper access segregation between modules. What steps do you take before investigating potential EC2 compromise? Enable termination protection, take EBS volume snapshots, capture instance metadata, and tag it as quarantine. These steps preserve evidence and prevent accidental data loss during investigation while maintaining the system state for forensic analysis. How do you configure intrusion detection software to monitor application traffic for regulatory compliance? Configure VPC traffic mirroring to send traffic to monitoring EC2 instances using a network load balancer. VPC traffic mirroring copies network traffic to monitoring instances for deep packet inspection without impacting application performance. What's a solution that maximizes security and minimizes development effort for a 30-day credential rotation? Store the database credentials in AWS Secrets Manager with automatic credential rotation configured for every 30 days. Secrets Manager provides a built-in automatic rotation for Aurora databases, handling the entire credential lifecycle without custom development. How do you allow application teams to provision IAM roles while preventing privilege escalation with least operational overhead? Create a service control policy and permissions boundary for IAM roles. Add the service control policy to the root organizational unit, requiring permissions boundaries for new role creation. Permissions boundaries limit maximum permissions, while SCPs enforce their their use organization-wide, enabling controlled self-service role creation. What's the most effective combination for AWS-wide suspicious activity detection? Turn on VPC flow logs for all VPCs and activate Amazon GuardDuty across all regions. VPC flow logs provide network visibility, while GuardDuty offers threat detection across regions. This combination provides comprehensive monitoring at a reasonable cost. What's a solution that maximizes flexibility and scalability for frequently changing Secrets Manager access? Secrets Manager use tag-based approach with resource policies, applying tags to secret and principals using AWS principal tag and AWS resource tag conditions. Tag-based access control provides flexible, scalable access management without requiring frequent policy updates as principals change. What's the most secure solution for centralized access management and logging across organizations' accounts? Replace SSH or RDP with Systems Manager Session Manager. Install the SSM agent, attach Amazon SSM Managed Instance core role, and then configure CloudWatch log streaming to a separate logging account. Sessions Manager eliminates the need for bastion hosts and provides centralized auditable access with comprehensive logging to a dedicated audit account. How do you review all usage of exposed access keys from, let's say, 11 days ago? Use Amazon Athena to query CloudTrail logs from S3, retrieve rows for exposed access keys for the past 11 days. Athena can efficiently query CloudTrail logs stored in S3 to analyze historical access keys usage beyond the console's limited time frame. What are the required steps to deploy ACM certificates for CloudFront distribution? Request a certificate from ACM and US East 1 region. Request DNS validation through the CNAME records. Create CloudFront distribution with the ACM certificate selection. CloudFront requires ACM certificates in the US East 1 region. DNS validation via CNAME records enables automatic renewal for domains not hosted on Route 53. How do you analyze API gateway access patterns without parsing log files with least effort? Configure access logging for required API stages. Use CloudWatch Logs Insights to analyze API access information. API gateway access logs combined with CloudWatch Logs Insights provides query capabilities for analyzing patterns without manual log parsing or additional infrastructure. What's the best method to quickly and temporarily deny access from specific IP address blocks for 24 hours? Modify network ACLs associated with all public subnets in a VPC to deny access from an IP address block. Network ACLs provide stateless filtering at the subnet level and can quickly block IP ranges. Unlike security groups, they support deny rules and apply to all instances in the subnet. How do you prevent documents from being edited, replaced, or deleted for 7 years while ensuring encryption at rest? Configure S3 server-side encryption, enable S3 versioning, configure S3 object lock in compliance mode with 7-year retention. S3 object lock in compliance mode prevents object deletion or modification, even by the root user. Versioning is required for object lock, and SSE provides encryption at rest. How do you design hybrid architecture for large data sets, data transfers with low latency and high consistency? Provision Direct Connect connections to AWS regions using Direct Connect Partner. Direct Connect provides dedicated network connections with predictable bandwidth and lower latency compared to internet-based VPN connections. How do you fix response signature invalid errors after a third-party identity provider renewed its signing certificate? Download an updated SAML metadata file from the identity provider and update the AWS identity provider entity using AWS CLI. When identity providers renew certificates, the SAML metadata containing the new certificate must be updated in the AWS IAM identity provider configuration. How do you restore communication between subnets after applying new NACLs with default entries? Add an outbound allow rule for the IP 192.168.2.0/24 in the VPC's default NACL. Add an inbound allow rule for that same IP address, or no, for 192.168.1.0-24 and subnet 2 NACL. NACLs are stateless, requiring both inbound and outbound rules. Default NACLs need outbound rules to a private subnet, and new NACLs need inbound rules from the public subnet. How do you prevent RDS databases from connecting to the internet without affecting application servers? Modify the route tables of the DB instance subnets to remove default route to the NAT gateway. Removing the default route from the database, that's 0.0.0, all IPs, from the database subnet route at tables prevents internet access while maintaining application server connectivity through different subnets. What's the most operationally efficient solution for near real-time monitoring of unrestricted SSH access violations? Use restricted SSH AWS config managed rules triggered by security group changes. Use config remediation to publish SNS notifications. AWS config's restricted SSH rule automatically detects security group violations and can trigger immediate notifications through SNS without custom development. How do you securely store and rotate database credentials for ECS applications while preventing plaintext sharing? Use AWS Secrets Manager to store credentials. Use IAM roles for ECS tasks to restrict access to specific containers. Secrets Manager provides automatic rotation and secure storage, while ECS task roles enable fine-grained access control without exposing credentials in code. How do you quickly determine which resources were deployed or reconfigured by former employees in the past 30 days? Filter CloudTrail event history for the past 30 days. Create Athena tables with data partitioned by event source. CloudTrail logs all API calls with user attribution. Athena enables efficient querying of historical logs to identify specific user activity patterns. How do you create an alarm that notifies before KMS key deletion? Create an event bridge rule to detect KMS API calls of disable key and schedule key deletion. Trigger a Lambda function to send an SNS notification. Event bridge can monitor KMS API calls in real time. Schedule key deletion and disable key are the key events that precede actual key deletion. How do you regain access to EC2 instances after losing the private key? Stop the instance, detach the root volume, generate a new key pair, attach the volume to another instance, modify authorized keys with a new public key, move back, and start. By mounting the root volume on another instance, you can modify the SSH authorized keys to add a new public key, then restore the volume to the original instance. How do you ensure EC2 instances are logged for DNS analysis in GuardDuty? Use AWS DNS resolvers for all EC2 instances. GuardDuty analyzes DNS logs from AWS DNS resolvers. External DNS resolvers don't provide logs to GuardDuty, limiting threat detection capabilities. How do you minimize downtime from future DDoS attacks? Subscribe to AWS Shield Advance and reach out to AWS support during attacks. Use WAF to create rules responding to attacks. Shield Advance provides DDoS response team support and cost protection, while WAF enables custom rules for application layer attack mitigation. How do you contain compromised EC2 instances while preserving forensic evidence? Add outbound security group rule denying port 587. Gather volatile memory, suspend from autoscaling, take a snapshot, move to isolated subnet with restrictive NACLs. Block malicious traffic immediately, preserve volatile evidence before it's lost, then isolate for investigation while maintaining forensic integrity. What's the right way to create policy for just an individual user? Add an inline policy for the user. Inline policies are embedded directly in a single user, group, or role and are appropriate for one-off, user-specific permissions. How do you resolve S3 access issues after adjusting IAM permissions for cross-account access? In account B, the create bucket policy to allow the user from the account A to access the S3 bucket. So cross-account S3 access requires both IAM permissions in the user's account and a bucket policy in the resource account, explicitly allowing the cross-account access. What's the most secure solution to ensure application content only accessible through CloudFront? Add an origin custom header, set the viewer protocol policy to HTTPS only, set origin protocol to match the viewer, update the application to validate the custom header. Custom headers verified by the application ensures requests only come from CloudFront, while HTTPS only policies enforce encryption in transit. How do you securely rotate RDS secrets every 3 months? Place RDS and Lambda in a private subnet with a NAT gateway. Place RDS and Lambda in a private subnet with Secrets Manager VPC endpoint. Lambda needs internet access via NAT, Network Address Translator, or VPC endpoint access to communicate with Secrets Manager for rotation. Both options keep RDS isolated in private subnets. What's the right way to implement encryption at rest and in transit? Use S3 SSE and use SSL for data in transit. S3 SSE provides encryption at rest stored data, while SSL TLS encrypts data during transmission between client and server. How do you fix encrypted object replication failures in S3 CRR? Grant the IAM role S3 get object version for replication permissions, and grant KMS decrypt permissions for source region key. Grant KMS encrypt permission for destination region key. CRR with KMS requires specific permissions to decrypt objects in source region and encrypt in a destination region, plus replication-specific S3 permissions. Which S3 bucket policy statement enforces KMS encryption with client-specified CMK? A policy with deny effect for put object without XAMZ server-side encryption and XAMZ server-side encryption AWS KMS key ID conditions. Deny policies with conditions on the encryption headers ensure all uploads specified use KMS encryption, blocking unencrypted or incorrectly encrypted objects. How do you grant appropriate database access for serverless application modules? Configure an IAM policy for each module with Get Cluster Credentials API call. Create a local database users for each module. Get Cluster Credentials enables IAM-based temporary database authentication, while separate database users ensure compliance with role separation requirements. Which services meet requirements for API tracking, resource inventory, and credential auditing? CloudTrail, AWS Config, and IAM credential reports. CloudTrail logs API calls. Config tracks resource configurations and changes, and credential reports can provide access keys and password usage information. How do you restrict development teams to specific regions and services with least operational overhead? Create service control policies with condition, resource, and not action elements to allow access only to needed regions and services. SCPs provide centralized governance across organization accounts, enforcing region and service restrictions without requiring individual account policy management. How to automatically block suspicious EC2 instance communication detected by GuardDuty. Enable Security Hub to ingest GuardDuty findings. Send this to EventBridge. Use Lambda to add the network firewall rule blocking traffic. Security Hub centralizes findings. EventBridge enables event-driven automation. And Network Firewall provides granular traffic control for threat containment. What's the fastest way to identify federated users who terminate a production EC2 instances? Filter CloudTrail for terminate instances event, identifying assumed IAM role. Review the assumed role with SAML event for corresponding username. CloudTrail links federated actions through a role assumption event, allowing correlation between the service action and the original federated user identity. How do you implement secure EFS file storage, elastic file storage access from on-prem with specific IP restrictions? Add an EFS mount target IP address to the firewall allow list. Add the data center server IPs to EFS security group. Mount using mount target IP address. Oops. Hold on. EFS mount targets have specific IP addresses that can be allow listed. Security groups control access to mount targets from specific source IPs. How do you redesign edge security to mitigate DDoS attacks? Move static content to S3 with CloudFront distribution, use WAF security rules, and use Route 53 for traffic distribution. CloudFront provides edge caching and DDoS protection. WAF blocks malicious requests, and Route 53 offers DNS-based load balancing and protection. How do you ensure ALB only accepts connections over port 443? Create a security group with a single inbound rule allowing connections from all IPs on port 443. Ensure it's the only security group associated with the ALB. Security groups to only port 443 allowed prevent any HTTP traffic, even if misconfigured listeners exist on ALB. What's the most secure way to maintain HIDS visibility while using privacy-enhancing technology? Enable TLS pass-through on an application load balancer. Handle decryption at the server using ECDHE cipher suites. TLS pass-through maintains end-to-end encryption while allowing server-side HIDS agents to inspect decrypted traffic, preserving both security and monitoring. How do you meet annual key rotation requirements for customer-managed keys with imported material? Import new key material to the existing customer-managed key and manually rotate the key. Keys with imported material cannot use automatic rotation. Manual rotation requires importing new key material to the same key ID. How do you stream data to Kinesis Data Firehose over the private network from on-prem? Create a VPC endpoint for Kinesis Data Firehose and configure the application to connect to the VPC endpoint. VPC endpoints enable private connectivity to AWS services without internet access, meeting security policy requirements for private network data transmission. How do you successfully launch EC2 instances from encrypted AMIs that immediately terminates? Update the KMS key policy to allow KMS encrypt and KMS decrypt actions for the federated IAM role. Encrypted AMIs require KMS permissions to decrypt during the instance launch. The federated role needs explicit KMS key access to use encrypted resources. How do you configure network ACL rules for web server access? Use inbound rule 100 to allow traffic on TCP port 443, inbound rule 200 to deny traffic on TCP port 3306, and outbound rule 100 to allow traffic on TCP port 443. NACL rules process by number order allows HTTPS, so 443 first, explicitly deny database port 3306, and allow outbound HTTPS for proper web server operation. Oops. How do you protect sensitive database information against data breach while minimizing management overhead with regular credential rotation? Enable RDS encryption for database and snapshots. Enable EBS encryption on EC2 instances. Store database credentials in Secrets Manager with automatic rotation, and set up TLS for RDS connection. A comprehensive security includes encryption at rest, so RDS EBS, encryption in transit, so TLS, and automated credential management through Secrets Manager with a built-in rotation. How do you ensure only principals in the organization structure can access specific S3 buckets while minimizing operational overhead? Specify organization ID in the global key condition element of a bucket policy, allowing all principals access. Using AWS principal org ID condition in a bucket policy automatically restricts access to only principals within the organization without managing individual accounts IDs. Which AWS services provide protection against Layer 3 and Layer 4 DDoS attacks? Amazon Route 53, AWS Shield, and Elastic Load Balancer. Route 53 provides DNS level protection. Shield offers network and transport layer DDoS protection, and ELB distributes traffic and absorbs attacks. What's the only way to know for certain if there was unauthorized access by sophisticated attackers covering their tracks? Use CloudTrail log file integrity validation. Log file integrity validation uses cryptographic hashing to detect any unauthorized modifications to CloudTrail logs, providing definitive proof of tampering. Why choose Cloud HSM over KMS for encryption key management, requiring administrative control and audit trails? HSM ensures only company support staff can administer encryption keys, whereas KMS allows AWS staff to administer keys. HSM provides dedicated hardware security modules under exclusive customer control, while KMS is a shared service where AWS manages the underlying infrastructure. What's the most operationally efficient solution to prevent developers from launching EC2 instances outside of US East 1 and US West 2? Use organizations with a service control policy that allows all actions when AWS requested region condition key is either US East 1 or US East 2. Delete the full AWS access policy. So SCPs with region-based conditions provide centralized enforcement across all accounts in the organization without requiring individual account policy management. How do you respond to EC2 abuse team notifications about compromised instances? Respond to notification listing actions taken to address incidents. Detach the internet gateway. Remove the all IP rules from security groups. Create NACLs to deny inbound internet activity. Proper incident responses include communicating with AWS and immediately isolating compromised resources from internet access while preserving evidence. How do you receive alerts if DDoS attacks occurs against an AWS account? Create a CloudWatch alarm that monitors Shield Advanced metrics for active DDoS events. Shield Advanced provides specific DDoS metrics that can trigger CloudWatch alarms, enabling automated notification of ongoing attacks. How do you encrypt ECR private repos and analyze container images for common vulnerabilities? Recreate ECR repos with KMS encryption and ECR scanning enabled analyze scan report after next image push. ECR native features include KMS encryption and integrated vulnerability scanning that analyzes images automatically upon push to repositories. How do you protect images and restrict distribution to licensed countries? Update the S3 bucket policy to restrict access to CloudFront OAI. Add CloudFront geo-restriction deny list for unlicensed countries. OAI ensures only CloudFront can access S3 content, while geo-restriction blocks access from specific countries at edge locations. Okay. How do you provide SSH access after removing SSH keys from EC2 instances using same IAM instance profile? Assigning an IAM policy to instance profile for systems manager management, provide IAM users systems manager permission, remove SSH keys, use systems manager to connect. Sessions manager provides shell access without SSH keys through IAM permissions and the SSM agent, eliminating key management requirements. How do you ensure SCPs conform to best practices? Use AWS IAM Access Analyzer to analyze policies and view findings from policy validation checks. Access Analyzer validates policies against best practices and identifies potential issues in SCP configurations across organizations. How do you restrict contractors' AWS accounts to EC2 console only, preventing access even with additional group permissions? Create IAM permissions boundary policies that allows Amazon EC2 access, associate the contractor's account with the permissions boundary policy. Permissions boundary sets the maximum permissions for IAM entities, preventing privilege escalation even if additional policies are attached. How do you allow IAM users to assume role in another organization's account? Create an identity policy allowing STS assume role in the user's account. Create the role in a target account with a trust policy allowing the IAM user to assume it. Cross-account access requires both permission to assume roles, identity policy, and authorization to be assumed, trust policy. How do you prevent unauthorized access and tampering of CloudTrail logs? Configure server-side encryption with KMS, implement least privilege access with bucket policy, configure CloudTrail log file integrity validation. Comprehensive log protection includes encryption, access controls, and integrity validation to detect any unauthorized modifications. Which key policy statement restricts CMK usage to only S3 actions? A policy statement with conditions restricting via service to S3 actions. The AWS via service condition condition key restricts key usage to specific AWS services, ensuring the CMK can only be used for S3 operations. How do you block malicious bots conducting SFTP brute force attacks on public EC2 instances? Add a deny rule to public VPC security groups to block the malicious IP. Security groups provide stateful filtering and can immediately block specific IP addresses attempting brute force attacks on EC2 instances. How do you collect logs from all containers into existing CloudWatch log groups using ECS Fargate? Turn on AWS Logs log driver by specifying parameters for AWS Logs group and AWS Logs region in log configuration property. The AWS Logs log driver is built into Fargate and can be configured in task definitions to send container logs directly to CloudWatch. How do you address audit findings about CloudTrail log tampering and unauthorized access? Ensure CloudTrail log validation is turned on. Use S3 bucket with tight access controls in a separate account. Encrypt CloudTrail logs with KMS. A multi-layered protection includes integrity validation, physical separation through cross-account storage, and encryption for comprehensive log security. What's the best way to monitor on a recurring basis whether all EBS volumes are encrypted? AWS config. Create a rule to run on a recurring basis for volume encryption. Config rules can automatically and continuously monitor EBS volume encryption compliance across all resources and regions. How do you fix CloudTrail logs not reaching S3 buckets from new regions with least operational overhead? Change the existing CloudTrail trail so that it applies to all regions. Modifying existing trail to be multi-region is more efficient than creating multiple trails and provides centralized log management. How do you resolve cross-account role assumption issues for developers? Ask developers to change the password and use a different web browser. Update the trust relationship policy on a production account role to allow developer account numbers. Trust policies must explicitly allow the source account, and MFA conditions in policies require proper authentication methods. How do you ensure TLS traffic remains secure even if certificate private keys are compromised? Create an HTTPS listener that uses security policies with Cipher Suite supporting perfect forward secrecy, PFS. PFS ensures session keys are ephemeral and cannot be used to decrypt past communications even if long-term keys are compromised. How do you ensure EC2 instances receive traffic only from CloudFront? Configure CloudFront to add custom HTTP header to requests. Configure the application load balancer to forward only requests containing the custom HTTP header. Custom headers added by CloudFront and validated by ALB ensure traffic originates only from the CDN, blocking direct access attempts. How do you determine if objects containing PII were accessed by compromised access keys? Configure Macy to identify objects in an S3 bucket containing PII available to the access key. Use Athena to query CloudTrail logs for API calls using the access key. Macy identifies PII in S3 objects, while Athena enables efficient querying of CloudTrail logs to correlate access patterns with compromised credentials. What's a valid option for storing SSL TLS certificates for HTTPS websites? Custom SSL certificate that is stored in AWS Certificate Manager. ACM provides secure certificate storage, automatic renewal, and easy integration with AWS services like CloudFront and ALB. How do you investigate compromised EC2 instances while preserving evidence and maintaining isolation? Move the instance to isolation subnets, denying all traffic. Detach from the auto-scaling groups and load balancer. Use systems manager run command, collect volatile data, and create an EBS snapshot and tag with the incident metadata. Proper forensics require network isolation, remote evidence collection to avoid contamination, and persistent storage of digital evidence with proper documentation. What's the most operationally efficient way to implement security notifications for CloudFormation compliance while maintaining delivery speed? Create an SNS topic for security team. Create a Lambda function running AWS CloudFormation validate template CLI command, and configure CI/CD pipeline to publish notifications if issues are found. Automated template validation in the CI/CD pipeline provides early detection of security issues without slowing development workflows. How do you meet requirements for low latency IPsec encryption between on-prem and AWS? AWS site-to-site VPN or Direct Connect. Direct Connect provides low latency while site-to-site VPN provides IPsec encryption. Combined, they meet both performance and security requirements. How do you meet backup requirements for DynamoDB tables twice monthly with 3-month retention? Use AWS Backup to create a backup plan with a 3-month retention period. Set backup frequency using a cron schedule expression and assign DynamoDB tables to the plan. AWS Backup provides centralized backup management with flexible scheduling and retention policies for DynamoDB and other AWS services. How do you complete a multi-account authentication and authorization using native AWS features? Use IAM Identity Center default directory to create users and groups. Assign groups to AWS accounts and link to permission sets according to job functions. Instruct employees to use Identity Center user portal. Identity Center provides centralized identity management with permission sets that define access across multiple AWS accounts through a single sign-on portal. How do you investigate GuardDuty anomalous behavior findings most quickly without affecting production? GuardDuty login with read-only credentials, review GuardDuty findings to determine which API calls initiated the finding. Use Amazon Detective to review API calls in context. Detective provides visual investigation capabilities that correlate GuardDuty findings with related AWS API activity and resource changes for further and faster root cause analysis. How do you receive email notifications about critical security hub findings without existing architecture? Create an event bridge rule to detect critical security hub findings. Create an Amazon SES simple email topic as a target and use the SES API to format the message for email recipients. EventBridge can filter security hub findings by severity, and SES provides direct email delivery without requiring SNS topic infrastructure. How do you ensure no logging data is lost during EC2 auto-scaling activities while keeping logs for exactly 7 years? Install a CloudWatch agent on all auto-scaling instances with configuration to forward logs to CloudWatch logs. Set log retention for desired log groups to 7 years. Attach the IAM role to launch configuration providing CloudWatch log permissions. CloudWatch agent ensures log collection from ephemeral instances. Proper IAM roles enable log forwarding, and retention policies automatically manage log lifecycle according to compliance requirements. Which IAM policy enforces MFA and limits session validity to 2 hours? Bool multi-factor auth present equals true, and then numeric greater than AWS auth factor age greater than 7200. Okay. Multi-factor auth present ensures MFA was used, while multi-factor auth age greater than 7,200 seconds, which is 2 hours, denies access, effectively limiting session duration. How do you design proactive monitoring solutions with automated remediation across production accounts? Activate Security Hub in each production account, aggregate findings in dedicated logging account, use Event Bridge to invoke Lambda function for remediation and SNS notifications. Security Hub aggregates findings from multiple security services, Event Bridge enables event-driven automation, and Lambda provides flexible remediation capabilities. How do you secure data in transit and at rest for e-commerce applications while minimizing cost and operational overhead? Use ACM TLS certificates with ALB, the load balancer. Deploy self-signed certificates on EC2 instances, and use TLS for the database connections, enabling RDS and EBS encryption. ACM provides free certificates for AWS resources. Self-signed certificates minimize costs for internal connections, and native AWS encryption features reduce operational overhead. How do you ensure uninterrupted communication with external payment providers requiring IP allow lists? Configure auto-scaling groups to place EC2 instances in private subnet. Deploy the ALB in a public subnet. Deploy a NAT gateway in each private subnet for every availability zone. NAT gateways provide static IP addresses for outbound connections from private subnets, ensuring consistent IP for external allow lists while maintaining security. How do you ensure consistent CloudFormation stack deployment across team members? Create a service role with a composite principal containing each required service, add separate policies for each required permission set with service arms, and update each stack to use the service role. Service roles provide consistent permissions for CloudFormation operations regardless of individual user permissions, ensuring reliable stack deployments. How do you centralize and search load balancer logs while generating Cipher metrics? Create S3 buckets for load balancer logs, use Athena to search logs, create Athena queries for required metrics, and publish it to CloudWatch. S3 provides cost-effective log storage. Athena enables SQL-based log analysis, and custom metrics in CloudWatch enable monitoring of specific security indicators. How do you investigate S3 access by compromised access keys and identify PII in the access files? Use CloudWatch log insights to identify objects containing PII available to access keys. Configure Macie to identify objects in the S3 bucket containing PII available to access key. Macie specializes in PII detection within the S3 objects, while CloudWatch logs insights can analyze CloudTrail logs to correlate access patterns with PII findings. Why does an employee still receive access denied after adding allow statement to a bucket policy that initially denied all access? The allow permission is being overridden by the deny. An AWS policy evaluation, explicit deny statements always override allow statements, regardless of order or specificity. What action allows ping command to work between on-prem hosts and EC2 instances? In the security group of the EC2 instance, allow inbound ICMP traffic. Ping uses ICMP protocol, and security groups are stateful. Allowing inbound ICMP automatically allows the return traffic. What's the most secure way to protect AWS account root user? Do not create access keys for the root user. Instead, create IAM users. Enable multi-factor authentication for the root user. The root user should only be used for emergency access with MFA protection, while daily operations should use IAM users with appropriate permissions. How do you ensure development teams follow deployment plans while limiting access to only necessary developers? Create a service catalog portfolio in management account, upload CloudFormation template, add to portfolio product list, share the portfolio with the organizational unit. The service catalog provides controlled access to approved CloudFormation templates, while organizations owe you sharing limits access to appropriate development teams. How do you block malicious traffic from changing IP addresses with least ongoing effort? Create an AWS WAF rate-based rule and attach it to the load balancer, application load balancer. WAF rate-based rules automatically detect and block excessive requests from any resource or any source, adapting to changing attack patterns without manual intervention. Why was a GuardDuty finding not created in Security Hub delegated administrator account? The GuardDuty integration with Security Hub was never activated in the AWS account where the finding was generated. Even with delegated administrator setup, each account must individually enable the integration between GuardDuty and Security Hub for findings to flow to the central account. How do you implement continual and on-push scanning of container images with centralized dashboard and repository exclusions? Use Amazon Inspector, create inclusion rules in ECR to match repositories needing scanning, push Inspector findings to Security Hub. Inspector provides advanced vulnerability scanners for all container images, while Security Hub offers centralized dashboards for all security findings. How do you implement continuous monitoring for compromised instances with email notifications for high severity findings? Enable GuardDuty in AWS account. Create an SNS topic and subscribe security team email list. Create event bridge rules for high severity GuardDuty findings, publishing to an SNS topic. GuardDuty detects compromised instances. Event bridge filters findings by severity, and SNS delivers email notifications to security teams for immediate response. How do you ensure developers can only launch EC2 instances with approved software in a development account? In software development accounts, create AMIs with only approved software. Include AMI IDs in CloudFormation template condition section based on region. Provide developers with CloudFormation template. Pre-approved AMIs ensure software compliance, while CloudFormation templates provide controlled deployment mechanisms, restricting developers to approved configurations. How do you improve signal-to-noise ratio for GuardDuty FTP server false positives without compromising visibility? Create a suppression rule in GuardDuty to filter findings by automatically archiving new findings matching specified criteria. Suppression rules automatically archive specific finding types while maintaining GuardDuty's overall threat detection capabilities for other anomalous behaviors. How do you encrypt ECR private repos and analyze container images for CVEs, common vulnerabilities? Recreate ECR repositories with KMS encryption and ECR scanning enabled. Analyze the scan report after the next image push. ECR has native features that provide both KMS encryption and vulnerability scanning, with automatic analysis triggered upon image push to repositories. How do you restrict a contractor's IAM account to EC2 console only, preventing access even with the additional group permissions? Create an inline IAM user policy that allows Amazon EC2 access for the contractor's IAM user. Inline policies are directly embedded in the user account and provide specific permissions without the risk of inheriting broader permissions from group memberships. How do you ensure all existing and future accounts have CloudTrail configured for centralized logging? Edit existing trails in organization's management account and apply it to the organization. Organization trails automatically apply to all current and future member accounts, providing centralized logging without individual account configuration. How do you continuously monitor and identify threats from DNS access peaks, abnormal traffic, and unusual S3 API calls in near real time? Enable GuardDuty from centralized account to manage CloudTrail logs, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs. GuardDuty aggregates and analyzes multiple data sources using machine learning to detect various threat patterns across different attack vectors. How do you resolve permission set assignment failure with customer managed policy across multiple accounts? Create customer managed policies in every account where permission set is assigned, giving the same name and permissions in each account. Customer managed policies and permission sets must exist in each target account with identical names and permissions for successful deployment. What's the most cost-effective way to secure sensitive information in Lambda environment variables? Store environment variables in Systems Manager parameter store as a secure string parameters. Access at runtime with IAM permissions, restricting access to required functions only. Parameter store secure string provides KMS encryption for sensitive data at lower cost than Secrets Manager. It's suitable for short, sensitive values. How do you ensure service control policies conform to best practices? Use IAM Access Analyzer to analyze policies and view findings from policy validation checks. Access Analyzer validates policies against AWS best practices and identifies potential security issues in SCP configurations. How do you recover EC2 instances in AWS account if it's compromised and EBS snapshots are deleted? Create a new AWS account with limited privileges. Allow new accounts to access KMS key encrypting EBS snapshots. Copy encrypted snapshots to new account on a recurring basis. Cross-account snapshots copies provide protection against account-level compromise while maintaining encryption through shared KMS key access. How do you isolate target EC2 instances while maintaining forensics teams access after security group changes don't affect existing SSH connections? Remove port 22 security group rules. Attach instance role policy allowing systems manager, sessions manager connections for forensic team access. Security groups don't affect existing connections. Sessions manager provides secure access without network connectivity, enabling proper isolation. How to fix CloudTrail logs not reaching S3 buckets from new regions with least operational overhead. Change S3 bucket to receive notifications to track all actions from all regions. Updating S3 bucket notification configuration to track all regions is more efficient than modifying CloudTrail trail configuration. How do you ensure EC2 instances receive traffic only from CloudFront? Configure CloudFront to add custom HTTP header to requests sent to application load balancer. Configure the load balancer to forward only requests containing this custom HTTP header. Custom headers added by CloudFront and validated by application load balancer ensures requests originate only from the CDN, blocking direct access attempts. How to replace plain text API key parameters in CloudFormation template while maintaining referenceability. Store the API key as a secure string parameter in Systems Manager parameter store. Replace the template references with the following command. Resolve SSM my SSMP parameter name 1. Parameter store secure string with CloudFormation dynamic references provides secure storage and retrieval without exposing sensitive values and templates. How do you prevent unauthorized access and tampering of CloudTrail logs? Configure server-side encryption with KMS. Implement least privilege access with a bucket policy. Configure CloudTrail log file integrity validation. Comprehensive protection includes encryption at rest, strict access control, and cryptographic integrity validation to detect any unauthorized modifications. What's the most cost-effective solution to preserve data for 7 years, preventing changes or deletions? Create an S3 bucket, upload data, use lifecycle rules to transition to S3 Glacier Vault, create a vault lock policy meeting regulatory requirements. Glacier provides lowest cost for long-term storage, while Vault Lock ensures immutability for regulatory compliance with automatic lifecycle management. How do you implement employee-only access to legacy web applications without changing the application? Place the application behind a load balancer, use Amazon Cognito as authentication for the load balancer, and define the SAML-based Cognito user pool connected to the Active Directory Federation service. The load balancer can integrate with Cognito for authentication, while SAML Federation with ADFS enables existing enterprise identity integration without application changes. How do you stop EC2 instances from exfiltrating data to external S3 buckets while maintaining processing functionality? Update the instance profile role policy to allow S3 actions only if AWS Resource Org ID condition key matches the company's value. Resource Org ID condition key restricts S3 access to only buckets within the company's organization, preventing data exfiltration to external accounts. How do you collect, review, and manage evidence from both on-prem and AWS resources for compliance demonstration? Create assessments in AWS Audit Manager from pre-built or custom frameworks. Upload manual evidence from on-prem workloads. Add evidence to assessments. Generate an assessment report after Audit Manager collects the AWS evidence. Audit Manager provides a structured compliance assessment capability that can incorporate both automated AWS evidence collection and manual evidence uploads from on-prem environments. That is the end of part 4. We'll come back with part 5. We have a few more before we're done with the AWS security. I hope you've enjoyed this and you're able to wrap your head around the basic ideas of AWS security's well-architected framework. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you.